Hello and welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
And we are the FAIRtax guys, coming to you from our Western Command headquarters, Florida FAIRtax Educational Association here in Ocala. And today we are going to get into part 2 of our trip to Oklahoma State, because that was really an adventure in more ways than one.
It was for us. I mean, to be quizzed by CPA students, you know, retired guys who are not CPAs, that was an adventure for us.
Jade was there to help us out a little bit on a couple of occasions. Yep. And again, our most sincere thanks to Jade Wally for making this trip to Oklahoma State possible.
And the students.
Yes, of course.
Truly appreciate your interaction and the questions and so forth, especially the ones that we're not sure of, because we learn more. Okay. You know, in trying to answer those questions, we learn more, so it makes us stronger.
Well, let's have at it. Part 2 of the FAIRtax guys at Oklahoma State University. Okay. Any more volunteers?
You know, maybe as we go through some of these questions.
We got lots of questions here we can deal with if we want to do this. I love number 9. Who asked me this? What will prevent this bill from being passed?
Congress,
critters, and lobbyists. That's what's happening with it now. And the fact that not enough people really know what the FAIRtax is yet. Yeah. We like to say, our little phrase is, once you understand it, you'll demand it. Because how many people, I did write that up there, but how many people, given the choice of, do you want to bring home my full paycheck, or do I want the government taking a chunk out of it before I get it? Do I want the government knowing all about my personal finances because I've got to file this income tax return, or can I keep my personal finances my personal business? I imagine most folks are going to choose, they would rather bring home their full paycheck and not have to share their personal financial situation with the government and all like that one. So the people will love it once they understand it. Just too many are apathetic about it. They haven't heard about it, or they figure, well, the government's going to do what they want to and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's why this program is on the air while we're out here talking to you today, to make sure that folks understand they do have a choice. You do have a choice as to whether you want to fill out an income tax return. You do have a choice as to whether you want to bring home your full paycheck or not. If you want to bring home your full paycheck and never do tax returns, y'all go to AFFT and sign up and help us get this thing passed.
Yeah.
That's my inspirational speech for the day. So
that's why it's important. That's why we thank Jade for inviting us out here.
And another one, what can I do to support the bill? There's a website, FAIRtax.org, which is just loaded with resource material, a bunch of FAQs there if you're not 100% sure exactly how this is going to work. And there are lots of white papers. Some of it's way too fairly technical. Jade's read all those things. And once you have, that was kind of the resource site where you can educate yourself about the FAIRtax. There's a second site called BigSolution.org. Solution, not solutions, no S there. BigSolution.org. That's where you go to sign up to join the Army and help get this thing done. How many of you would really like to bring home the full gross amount of your paycheck once you get out of school and keep going, versus how many want to feed the government first before you feed your family? Yeah. So you all should be out there on the front lines helping us get this thing passed, and we would appreciate it if you would tell your family and friends about the podcast here. Share it when it comes on streaming, and we'd sure appreciate the help. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, a repeat customer. You know you're doing something right when you get repeat business. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'm Diana. Here I am again. So if I understood correctly, education expenses are not subject to the FAIRtax.
Right. Tuition is not subject to the FAIRtax.
I'm planning on going into audit, so I'm thinking of all the things people could do to avoid some of these things. With homeschool, for example, how are they going to say, oh yeah, this food was for the child in a homeschool environment? Technically that would be an education expense, because in school you're paying the school to provide food for children at public school. Who's to say what's an education expense in that scenario, and who's to say what is not?
That's a good one, but I think, again, the answer lies with the fact that it will be the states that are monitoring this, and they know how to look for fraud now. Now that may be a different area, but they will gain some experience with it, and they're going to be able to collect data from other people that are homeschooling. And if they see an expense that's way out of the norm, with all the others, I think that's going to be a red flag, and they might send somebody to visit that home and say, "Can you explain this?"
Well, tuition is not going to be subject to the fair tax, but food is. And I think that's the simple answer, that you're not really going to have to make that differentiation. Gee, I'm feeding my homeschool kid, otherwise I'd be paying the school to do this.
Yeah.
So I think that's really splitting hairs, and I'm not sure exactly if I've given you a satisfactory answer or not. But again, the prebate will cover the tax on your food, considering that you're going to buy food before you go to Disneyland or something like that. So,
but these types of questions are good because we got 330 million people in this country, and there's going to be a small percent. I was a high school principal for a while, junior high principal. 1,000 kids in the building. Most of the kids were just fine. It was that same 20 kids that I saw in my office over and over again. There's always going to be some that will tie it. For some reason, they think doesn't apply to them. They may get away with it to some degree. It's going to be a very small percentage, but then when the system catches up with them, again, it's not going to be pretty. And the others will learn from it. But I think they'll be able to collect data.
You're not reporting expenses to the government with a fair tax anymore.
Yeah.
You just pay it when you buy things.
Yeah.
And it's not included in your tuition costs. It probably would be included in the price of the books you have to buy.
Yeah.
So some of the same rules, like for a 539 education fund, they would just kind of roll over for what counts as education in that sense.
You mean the savings plan?
Yes.
The 539.
What you can use your
there would be
money
no
for.
need because there is now no income tax on your savings. You'll be able to save whatever you want in any way at any time and never pay taxes on the interest and dividends. And so it's going to encourage people to save and invest more. All right, and that kind of goes back to the question about, well, what if he makes $5 million a year, but he only spends $4 million? First off, it's none of your business. Secondly, what's he going to do with the rest of it? All right, is he going to stuff it under his mattress? I don't think so. He's going to invest it someplace where he gets a return on it. And while it's being invested, it's available for startups, so forth. So, so I think that's the way it'll happen.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. I'm also a graduate student at OSU in accounting. So a question I have for you guys is with the recent tax reform, President Trump expected a lot of companies to, put that tax break back into the economy and, investing and stimulate, American jobs and things like that. And while some companies did do that, a large portion of companies actually participated in stock buybacks. So I'm just kind of wondering, while we know the fair tax would give businesses a lot more capital to do things with, which, you guys are saying that they'll put that back into their services that they're offering to customers or to other companies and their products that they're selling, it'll bring down that price. But we know that humans are greedy and they're not always acting in others' best interests, and who's to say that executives won't take that money and put that into equity or participate in more stock buybacks or just line their own pockets and use that for different expenses rather than putting that back into the American economy, putting it into the consumer and everything that you guys have been talking about.
I'm thinking the free market is going to handle most of that. If one company decides they want to get greedy and start keeping all these little windfalls, and another one that's a competitor says, I'm going to pass this on to the consumer. We have seen this happen before, that a 9/11 related tax on airline tickets went away. Mm-hmm. At first, all the airlines said, we'll just pocket the difference, until one airline says, wait a minute, if I pass this on, I can steal more passengers from these other guys. The free market is I think, the answer that's really going to define what happens in that case.
while I understand that, and I totally get, and we've heard that example yesterday too. So I mean, that's really the only example that I've kind of heard about, the free market regulating, which I understand that the free market does regulate a lot of things. But with the recent tax reform, we literally just saw a lot of companies put that all into stock buybacks and not, like big companies like Apple, Amazon, like companies that do control a large share of the market.
Yeah. Well, kind of what they do with their money, they decide what to do with it. Jade,
Business.
I think we're going to call in a little help on this one. Here you go, Jade. Have at it.
All right, I'll join. So I think one of the things, there has been a lot of stock buybacks. If we think about when a company buys back equity shares, one of the big uses for that is employee remuneration. Like, yeah, you know what? Now I can give even more stock options, restricted share awards, performance share awards, etc., to my employees, so I can increase their take-home pay. And so that's a big chunk of what the stock buybacks do. Also, a stock buyback is signaling to the market, I think my share price is too cheap. And so it's also a way to invest in your company, and what that does for all the 401k holders, their retirement accounts, etc. Supply and demand, so you're buying more of it, it drives the price up, it benefits every investor out there who's investing in it. So it's all part of, it's not a direct, like, hey, I didn't raise Kelsey's salary directly, but it indirectly flows back through you. So a stock buyback, I've heard a lot of that in the news. That's not necessarily an evil or bad thing. That's part of the free market working through it. And it's a company investing in itself. And a lot of what they do is now they have extra shares in their treasury. It goes back to you guys as employees.
Yeah.
Thought I'd just chime in there.
That's very good.
That was a CPA realm question that I figured that you could probably answer better.
Well, I mean, to us, as a retired high school teacher, and Bob is a DJ and computer programmer, that stuff is not something we run into every day, except that generally I understand that companies are made of people. Always. A company is a legal fiction. And they always are made of people. And if they're going to keep money, or if they're going to spend money, whatever they do with it, it's always going to be people that benefit in one way or another. And if it goes to the stockholders, well, then the stockholders have more money, so they can spend it, and it helps the economy. If it goes to the employee, then they got more money, So however it passes through, it will pass through to people eventually, one way or another. People will always benefit. And when you get the government out of the way and you reduce the regulations, I like to say that what they did, now first off, Bob and I refuse to call the Tax Cut and Jobs Act tax reform, because you transformed the tax system from an income tax, a payroll tax, and a corporate tax administered and enforced by the IRS to an income tax, a payroll tax, and a corporate tax administered and enforced by the IRS. It's still, the rates have changed.
That's
and it
Kerry
has helped
Bowers
the economy.
doing. Let's give him credit for coming up with that.
But prior to that was enacted in December of 17. Prior to that, when Trump got in office, he started cutting back on regulations. He told the federal bureaucracy, you need to get rid of 2 antiquated regulations for every new one that you want to impose, okay? And it actually did much better than that. Well, simplifying regulations and making it easier for businesses to do business allows them to expand and create more jobs. That's what the FAIRtax does. So we say that what they did in 2017 is making the case for the FAIRtax, because the FAIRtax will reduce compliance costs, and it'll reduce eliminate the corporate tax for for them, and so they're making the case for us. They did it to some degree. We're going to do it to a much larger degree, and really launch the economy. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Sarah,
Thanks,
how are we
Jay.
doing on time here? We don't want to hold your folks too long.
No, we're doing great.
We're doing all right? Any more? I would like to, there's one
Yeah,
question
there
here
we
that's
go.
on our page. Okay.
I'll just do a continuous.
Oh, another
good.
repeat customer.
Yeah.
I found one here I want to deal with too.
This is a continuance of the education question.
Okay.
Okay.
Since this is a public university, we are state funded. And if the state is not going to be getting a benefit from taxes anymore, what's their incentive to fund Oklahoma State?
Well,
So they're not.
this is
they
fun,
wouldn't.
but the fair tax is a national thing, and the state guy will still continue to do what they're doing.
So the state tax will still tax?
Yeah, the
things
state will
OSU,
still,
and the
each state will
federal
still
government
support
won't?
their public universities.
Yeah. Now, they may be coerced, you might say, into going with a state sales tax in lieu of the income tax. Because, I often say that my wife and I escaped from New York a number of years ago, where they have every tax that you could possibly think of on everything up there. And they tax income, they tax sales, they tax at the county level, the state level, and so forth. Well, how does the New York State collect the tax? Well, first you do your federal taxes, and then you get out the state form, and you take numbers from the federal form and put it onto your state form. What if there is no federal form? What are they going to do? They're going to be taking a serious look at, do we really need a state income tax, or should we go along with what the other states are doing and do it strictly with a sales tax? So,
But the incentives that states have to fund their public universities now will not change under the fair
Yeah,
tax at all.
yeah. And one aside is there are several states, Alabama is one of them, who is seriously considering a state sales tax, getting a state fair tax, getting rid of their income tax, going with a consumption tax, including a prebate.
Yeah. And Georgia's doing the
which
same.
We're hoping that happens soon.
Okay, good enough? Others? I see one off the paper here. When would taxpayers start seeing the benefits? The answer to that is when you bring home your first paycheck with no withholding and no payroll taxes taken out of it. And then you really start seeing the benefits when the economy takes off. There are economists a lot smarter than me that have said that the fair tax would be, and these are their words, rocket fuel for the economy. So you'll start seeing benefits when you get your first paycheck. How long it takes you to get the full effect, we'll just see how long it takes to launch the economy, and I don't think it'll be that long.
No, and I think there's going to be planning. Obviously, businesses don't like, one of the reasons they don't like the income tax is because there's a very low stability. They don't know what the income tax is going to look like next year. It's very difficult for them to plan in advance. So with the fair tax, they're going to have that stability, and they're going to be able to plan. And when they know this is coming, when it passes Congress and the president signs it, a president signs it, whenever it is, they know what's coming next year or maybe in 2 years, however long they decide, when they're going to implement it. And they'll be able to plan. So I think you're going to start seeing the positive effects even before it goes into effect.
Okay. All right. Ooh, goody. Here comes another one.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm a graduate student here as well. So I kind of have a few questions. So you kind of said before that, well, it was said yesterday with the fair tax, the state tax system stays the same. And so right now there's a lot of incentives from state to state. So there's a ton of income tax incentives in Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma to produce more oil and gas there because it's more incentivized. It goes along with the film industry as well. It's cheaper to produce a film in Georgia. And so there's all these incentives there that promote business. And then also you have a use tax. So if you go to a different state, you're charged a different sales tax because you're not a citizen there. So what's to say that if you bring in a fair tax and then income tax kind of gets eliminated, and then, like you said, you may not have a state income tax because there's not a federal number. So what's to say that states won't burden there's outside, so they'll place more burden on their non-citizens so that there wouldn't be a greater burden on the consumer. For instance, if I'm purchasing a lot of lumber, I may not get all that lumber from Oklahoma. I may have to go from a different state. So what's to say you're not going to put a greater burden on the consumer just because they're not in your state?
That's a good one.
How the states are going to respond to the fair tax is going to be largely up to them. So we really can't say, if the fair tax goes into the national level, Oklahoma is going to do this, Texas is going to do this, Nebraska is going to do this, Kansas is going to do this. So best we could do is speculate on that one. I'm not sure I can give you a hard and fast answer because nobody's going to really know how each state is going to respond to the fair tax, and each state will continue to maintain its own autonomy as far as what their tax policy is going to be. So I can't tell you what one state's going to do versus another one. Wish I could.
Yeah, The only thing, I couldn't address that either, except to say that if a company finds itself with a windfall, it's going to do what it believes is best for the company to maintain the company. All right? The states will be doing the same thing. The states are going to make decisions on what's best for the states. And if their state legislatures are truly interested in helping the people of their states, and I think the state legislatures are more responsive to the people than the federal legislature. All right, so I think there's going to be more accountability there, and so they're going to make decisions based on what's best for their constituents. But exactly what they're going to do, I couldn't possibly entertain that.
Okay, so I guess I have like a second question to that. So, you kind of like look to the federal government to uphold our own rights between different clauses based on like what is, so basically a state taxing an outside citizen that like can conflict what my rights, because you're supposed to equally tax and equally have equal rights. So can we trust Congress to step in when it becomes too competitive and states are causing too much competition? Like you said, there's concern that Congress doesn't act quickly enough. So is there concern that the states get too competitive and then Congress doesn't step in to mitigate some of that burden?
I don't know if that's Congress's role.
But if they like set in bills, or if there's...
I don't think it really matters. If you go to Texas, you pay the Texas sales tax if you buy something, even if you're an Oklahoma resident. So I'm a little bit confused about how this residency part comes into it. You know, if I buy something here during this trip, I'm going to pay Oklahoma tax, not Florida tax on it. When I get home, I'll pay the Florida tax if I buy it in Florida. So what states continue to charge is going to be up to them. And if, you know, I don't think people are going to travel a great deal of distance. I mean, if the state border is 2 miles away and is less tax in the next state, it may be worth it to go over there, and it may not be.
Yeah.
But I don't see Congress getting involved in the state level. You know what they do with their taxation.
Yeah, it's definitely like complicated questions. They're definitely at the state level, but
it is.
So if also you're saying there's like, because the federal government, if they have a fair tax, they don't have to fight tax evasion as much. There's less, like equalizes the tax base. So right now there's a lot of sales tax consulting going on where they're trying to fight sales tax. So do you think that like litigation costs and compliance costs would go up for people trying to fight those sales tax? Would there not be some sort of like increased expense because the government is having to fight more sales tax cases that relate to a fair tax case?
I'm not aware of any litigation regarding sales taxes. You've asked me something that I don't know about, but
No.
Jay, in your experience, do we know what this lady's talking about as far as, we'll call our CPA buddy back in here, as litigation regarding sales taxes? That's
I mean, I think about, you always hear about the frauds with the IRS, or horrible tax evasion and mobsters, etc. I've never really heard about huge state sales tax defalcations, and you just don't see about it. I know there's a little bit on the fringes, but what is your question?
Like right now, a lot of companies will come in and say like, well, you shouldn't have charged me that, and there's like a lot of lawyers that are fighting that. And so these like, and that's like another state question, but if it's a federal sales tax, almost consumption tax, there's like a concern that they will have to beef up their support because there'll be lawyers that maybe tax lawyers who lost their jobs, so they want to go fight sales tax or fight fair tax. Like what's that concern?
Well, give me a scenario of how a lawyer would come in and say, hey, my client paid the fair tax on something and they should get a refund, and I'm going to sue you. What would that scenario be?
I think the argument could be really strong in what's the end product, like back to that, because you can really fight that and create a lot of like, that wording means so much, and I think there could be like fights there to be like, well, that's not my end product, and just...
Give me a scenario.
So you're going in, and let's say you're like, you could just kind of go back to everyone's examples. So you're building a home, and they could say like, I mean, I can't like think of exact example on the spot, but just in general, I'm trying to think of a good one.
Yeah, what it sounds like to me, what you're talking about is almost lobbyists, not, you know.
It's more like just like businesses trying to avoid a tax, I guess.
Yeah, that's lobbyists.
Yeah, let's just say there are some scenarios like that on the fringes, and somebody wants to do that. I can guarantee you the cost and the girth and the lawyers and all the red tape and the 90,000 IRS employees now and everything we deal with the income tax far outweighs anything that could come about. You'll have the random thing, well, I bought that carburetor and I thought it was, I shouldn't pay the income tax because then I sold the truck. I mean, you can get into, weird things, but at the end of the day, was it the end consumer or not? And again, when we go back to those stats, 90 to 95% of retail sales, so 90 to 95% of FAIRtax collections are going to come from like a very small percentage of huge companies. So all the rest is like, you saw 21. You say 21. I've seen a 25% stat on evasion now. Maybe it's 21. Versus I think the worst case scenarios for sales tax evasion up to 2%. And that was based in California, very diverse economy, where it's probably worse there than the rest of the country. So you're talking about stuff that could maybe be in the 2%, and some of the other questions have been about that. There's always, as long as there's human beings, there's going to be a little bit of evasion and there's going to be some hassle. Everything we're talking about is minuscule compared to the current income tax attorneys and all the hoo-ha you have to go through with all the stuff they sue on and everything. But it doesn't mean there won't be some, because people are people.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
You're welcome. No problem. Sure.
Hi, my name's Paul. So one of the big selling points of the FAIRtax plan is its simplicity, and that's definitely a big thing. You can't argue that our current tax code is simple in any way, shape, or form. It surely isn't.
76,000 pages.
Yeah, I've had to study it. It's pretty terrible. But it wasn't written that way on the first day. It started out, I'm assuming, relatively simple, and then day after day, you keep adding this exception, and then the exception to that exception. I'm just talking about our tax code in general. Like it happened over time. Like it was a progress to get where we are. And I just see those same incentives not going away. People are still going to lobby Congress. So maybe day one, the FAIRtax looks like the dollar cube over there, but what's to keep it from looking like the Rubik's Cube in 20 years? Because now it's going to be the only game in town, so people are going to go to work on it as well.
My first thought on that is, how many of those 683 proposed changes to the tax code do you know about?
Zero.
If they change the FAIRtax, are you going to know about it? The FAIRtax is going to be much more out in the sunshine, and if they start messing with it, a lot of the reason that some of this junk gets into the tax code is because nobody's paying attention, nobody cares, it's not going to affect me, so I don't care what happens with it. If they start monkeying with the FAIRtax, it is going to affect you directly, you're going to know about it, and it's just going to be a lot harder to mess with, because the public is going to have a much closer eye on what goes on with the FAIRtax than what's going on with the income tax.
Yeah, and the public is going to have to keep a close eye, because what you're saying will happen. There's no question. We have people in Congress that use the tax code like a Stradivarius to play one group against another. They like that power and that capability. They're not necessarily going to go away immediately, so we're going to have to watch them. It will require the public being very vigilant, because that is a real threat. And we can't nickel and dime this thing to death, and if we let them do it. And plus, at least at first, for whatever president signs the FAIRtax, all right, that person is not going to be willing to go ahead and sign legislation that dilutes it, all right?
I wish I could tell you that over 20 years the FAIRtax is not going to change at all, but I don't have that kind of crystal ball. But I can tell you, just kind of based on the nature of this system versus the FAIRtax versus the income tax, the FAIRtax is going to be a lot harder to monkey with. Not that it can't be monkeyed with, but it'll be a lot harder to monkey with, and it won't get this bad this fast as the income tax has. That I can pretty much guarantee you.
But we will definitely have to keep our eyes open.
But if they start monkeying with it, and it shows up on the receipt of every time you buy something, you'll know it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Oh, another repeat customer.
Hey guys, again, my name's Cameron. This is something we kind of touched on a little bit yesterday, but for the most part glossed it over. So the government also uses tax as a means to kind of nudge you onto what they don't want you to do. You know, like cigarettes. For
Oh, yeah.
example. I mean,
Yeah.
The sin taxes in general.
Light bulbs.
Sure, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, are those taxes still going to be in place? Will
Well-
it be like 50%
Yeah,
tax
well,
on
the
a
fair
pack of
tax is only
cigarettes?
going to replace the income tax system. It's not going to replace excise taxes.
All that other stuff.
So
Okay.
if the government decides that they want to place, a $1,500 a pack tax on cigarettes
Right.
to deter people from doing it, there's nothing in the fair tax that would stop them from doing that. But again, the fair tax is a replacement for the income tax system only, and the all the other ancillary taxes that are still there are still going to be there, and we'll just have to deal with them as we're dealing with them now.
Sure. I was just wondering because it was related to consumption. And I didn't know if it would be lumped into.
One nice thing, it's going to take a lot of the mistake. It's going to be easier to watch Congress and what they're doing because all the income tax nonsense is out of the way now.
Right.
And it's like Bob said, it's going to put more sunshine on them, so it'll be easier.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
Thanks.
there we go. All right. We've been at this for almost an hour. One last chance. Anybody have any more questions? Okay.
I'm Keandre. Thanks for being here again. So before I ask my question, I kind of want a little bit more of clarification. So we've heard a lot about this prebate. So to my understanding, a prebate is something that's given to all American households. So in other words, you have to be a U.S. citizen.
Yes, legal households.
I would say legal resident.
You have to have a
resident.
valid social security number.
Okay. So how would this affect people who are here on a visa status? Because I know people like, from personal experience, who are here for educational purposes. So if they're not given that prebate, it makes the cost of living here like really expensive and kind of hard to
That's a good one.
adjust to.
And I'm not sure. Have you heard this one before?
If there's anything in the bill, I don't know if there's a possibility that someone, say a Canadian citizen that comes and buys something and say, I'm not subject to U.S. taxes, there may be a mechanism by which they can apply to have that refunded to them. And Jade's saying, yeah, I think he's, I think we're close here.
All right. I think there's certain treaties in place with the U.S. government and other countries, not on income tax, but on consumption taxes. And so if you guys, anyone ever been to Europe, and you get those receipts, and maybe you're in London and you go to Harrods, the big shop, and if you go down to the bottom basement, you can get a little receipt, and then when you hit the airport on the way out, you get your VAT refunded to you. Anyone ever done that?
Never
I'm
been
the only cheapo guy who did that. And,
You're the only one that's been to London.
yeah, those are treaties in place, and so I believe, and maybe we can get Randy to confirm, corroborate, verify that if you are here on a visa in say 6 months or a year, might be some record of keeping your receipts, but then as you exit the country, because you're not a resident, but you were here legitimately, you can get refunded that fair tax. I think that's how the treaties work.
I think that's how it would work too.
But don't quote me.
Okay. We've had a couple of really good questions that we're
Hopefully,
not too
as
sure
this as this episode streams, Randy's watching it and he can jump in. So if y'all watch,
Exactly.
y'all watch this as it streams, and we'll and keep an eye on our FAIRtax guys Facebook page. We'll be announcing when these things will be coming on, and we'll announce this one well in advance of when it's going to stream, and hopefully y'all can see yourselves. And then if some of the experts that watch that with us can chime in on the comments, you may be able to get a better answer then than we can give you right now. Very good question, though.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. All right. I think that's just about going to wrap it up. So again, I appreciate the invitation to come out here and talk to y'all. Maybe we can do it again sometime. And
Maybe a year from
again, we invite you to watch the program, share it on your social media, tell your family and friends to watch about it. And what do we got here?
You guys get Oklahoma State paraphernalia gifts for coming here.
How cool is that?
Yeah, some OSU T-shirts. Thank you, guys.
Of course, that's really nice.
Thank you.
Especially the first time we started talking about this, I got this confused, and I said University of Oklahoma, and he come back on me and says, "No, that is not correct." So we're still friends.
We fixed that right away.
So appreciate that again. Thank you for having us, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks very much.
And thus ends part 2 of the FAIRtax Guys' adventure to Oklahoma State University. What, an amazing experience. Thanks to Jade Wiley. Thanks to Sarah Johnson, the professor of the course, for allowing us to come out there. And we'll just see what happens about this time next year.
And thanks to the students, too. We really appreciate your interaction.
Absolutely. Do you want to sneak in a grassroots corner here real quick before we leave the air today?
Yeah, because of travel plans and so forth, some of these episodes are being recorded well in advance, so I want to get this in so we don't get too far behind. Jim Bennett's Grassroots Corner from May 31st. Sometimes seeds you plant sprout years later. That's what happened with our Alabama team when they went to work on Congressman Gary Palmer, who represents the 6th District in Alabama. Congressman Palmer became our 31st co-sponsor of the FAIRtax on May 14th. Congressman Palmer had been a co-sponsor in the 114th Congress, and apparently he took a little vacation there. But Alabama State Director Chuck Bailey was asked, how did you guys stay involved? And he said, yeah. He said, Mary Lynn, who I assume is his wife, and I were totally involved with Jackie and Art Matthews, the District 6 coordinators, and we attended his discussions and town halls. Congressman Palmer, as I said, took a little vacation from the FAIRtax in the previous Congress, but he got back in it on his own in the 116th Congress just a few weeks ago. So we thank him. Now here's the another part of the Grassroots Corner. Now our Alabama team will be motivated to perform maintenance, and that means educating the public in his district, District 6 in Alabama, is just what it means to be a co-sponsor of the FAIRtax and what the FAIRtax is. So just a little note from our Grassroots Corner that I wanted to insert there.
And real quickly, let me point people to fairtax.org. You can get copies of the chairman's report. Mm-hmm. We've been making fun of the kitty tax. There have been several references to it on our little excursions into congress.gov. We were making fun of that. Really wasn't sure what it was. Steve Hayes explains that quite well in the chairman's report for May 24th. We'll don't have time to get into it now, but we possibly might touch on that a little bit later on FAIRtax Power Radio. But if you want to learn about what this kitty tax is and how insane and crazy it is, check out the chairman's report for May 24th. You can do that at fairtax.org. Until then, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
The FAIRtax guys remind you again that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid. Also, any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, or maybe we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but, it's all right here.
Can I get a copy of that?